The number 47 bus rumbled through the streets of Oceanside, California, every weekday morning at 7:15 sharp. Most passengers barely noticed each other, earbuds in, faces buried in phones, the usual morning routine. But on this particular Tuesday in late September, the regular riders had grown accustomed to one passenger who always sat in the same spot, third row from the back, right side, window seat. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, though nobody on that bus knew it. To them, she was just the quiet woman with the German shepherd, the one who never caused trouble, never spoke unless spoken to, and always got off at the stop near the naval base. Sarah was 34 years old, lean and weathered in a way that spoke of years spent under harsh suns and harsher circumstances. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes, jeans, a plain gray jacket and worn sneakers. Nothing about her appearance screamed military, and that was exactly how she preferred it. After 12 years as a Navy SEAL, the last thing she wanted during her morning commute was attention. Beside her sat Atlas, her 3-year-old German shepherd. The dog was a retired military working dog, medically discharged after taking shrapnel during a mission in Syria. Sarah had adopted him 8 months ago, and the two had formed an unbreakable bond. Atlas was calm, well-trained, and wore his service vest with quiet dignity. His dark eyes watched everything, missing nothing, just like his owner. This morning started like any other. Sarah boarded the bus, tapped her pass, and made her way to her usual seat. Atlas followed closely, his nails clicking softly on the rubber floor. She settled in, and Atlas lay down at her feet, resting his head on his paws. 3 stops later, trouble got on. They were young, probably early 20s, 4 of them dressed in baggy clothes and radiating the kind of false confidence that comes from running in packs. The loudest one, a tall kid with a spider web tattoo creeping up his neck, swaggered down the aisle. His friends followed, laughing too loud at nothing, making sure everyone on the bus knew they were there. "Yo, check it out," Spiderweb said, pointing at Atlas. "We got a police dog up in here." Sarah didn't look up. She'd learned long ago that eye contact was often an invitation, and she had no interest in engaging. "Hey, lady," one of the others called out, a shorter guy with gold teeth. "That your attack dog?" "Service dog," Sarah said quietly, keeping her eyes on the window. "Service dog," Spiderweb laughed, moving closer. "What, you blind or something? You look fine to me." His friends snickered. A few other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but nobody said anything. This was the problem with public transit. Everyone became an island unto themselves. Hopping trouble would pass them by. "He's a veteran," Sarah said, her voice still calm. "Retired military working dog." "Military?" Gold Teeth leaned over the seat in front of her, invading her space. "So what, you think that makes you special? You think you're better than us?" Sarah finally looked up at him. Her green eyes were steady, unflinching. "I think you should step back and leave us alone." The third thug, skinny with nervous energy and acne scars, let out a high-pitched laugh. "Oh snap, she's giving orders now. What are you, some kind of soldier girl?" "Yeah, probably scrubbed toilets on a base somewhere and thinks she's tough," Spiderweb added, encouraged by his friend's reactions. He moved even closer, standing directly in the aisle next to Sarah's seat. "Let me tell you something, lady. That dog don't scare me, and you sure as hell don't scare me." Atlas's ears perked up slightly, sensing the tension, but he remained still. Sarah had trained with him extensively. He wouldn't move unless she gave the command, no matter the provocation. "I'm not trying to scare anyone," Sarah said, her voice remarkably even. "I just want a quiet ride to work." "To work?" the fourth one spoke up, a heavy-set guy with a Raiders beanie. "What, you gonna go serve coffee to real soldiers?" The others laughed. Spiderweb was getting bolder now, feeding off the attention. He reached down toward Atlas. "Don't touch my dog," Sarah said, and for the first time there was steel in her voice. "Or what?" Spiderweb's hand hovered inches from Atlas's head. What you gonna do about it, lady? The bus driver, an older man named Frank who'd been driving this route for 15 years, caught Sarah's eye in the rearview mirror. She gave him the slightest shake of her head. Not yet. Not worth it. Spider Webb noticed the exchange and grinned. Yeah, that's what I thought. All bark, no bite. He turned to his friends. These military people, man, they ain't nothing off base. Without their guns and their buddies, they're just regular people, scared like everybody else. Please leave her alone, a woman's voice came from across the aisle. An elderly lady with white hair and a church hat looked at the young men with disapproval. She's not bothering anyone. Mind your business, Grandma, gold teeth snapped at her. That was when Sarah's jaw tightened. Disrespect toward her, she could handle. She'd endured far worse during her years of service, from enemies, from skeptics within her own ranks who didn't think women belonged in special operations, from politicians who used her team as political pawns. But watching these punks intimidate an elderly woman crossed a line. She stood up slowly. At 5'7", Sarah wasn't particularly tall, but something in the way she moved made Spider Webb take an involuntary step back. Apologize to her, Sarah said quietly. Spider Webb recovered quickly, puffing out his chest. Or what? Apologize now. The bus had gone completely silent except for the rumble of the engine. Every passenger was watching now, the morning's invisible barriers broken by the brewing confrontation. Spider Webb looked around at his friends, then back at Sarah. He couldn't back down now, not in front of his crew, not in front of all these witnesses. You know what? I'm tired of people like you thinking you run everything. Military this, veteran that. You probably never even saw combat, probably some desk job filing papers. Sarah didn't respond. She simply looked at him with those steady green eyes, and in that look was something that finally penetrated Spider Webb's bravado, a depth of experience, of things seen and done that couldn't be faked. But he'd gone too far to stop now. His hand shot out toward Atlas again, this time making contact with the dog's head. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Sarah's hand moved in a blur, catching Spider Webb's wrist in a grip that made him gasp. She applied just enough pressure to a nerve cluster to cause intense pain without causing injury, a control technique she'd learned years ago. His knees buckled slightly. I asked you nicely, Sarah said, her voice still calm, almost gentle. Don't touch my dog. She released him and sat back down. Atlas hadn't moved an inch. Spider Webb stumbled back, clutching his wrist, his face flushed with pain and humiliation. You assaulted me, you all saw that. She assaulted me. Frank, the bus driver, pulled over at the next stop, which happened to be right in front of a police station. He opened the doors and spoke into the intercom. Everyone stays on the bus. We've got a situation. No, no way, Gold Teeth protested. She's the one who grabbed him, we didn't do nothing. 2 police officers who'd been standing outside the station approached the bus. Frank explained the situation, pointing to the young men. Several passengers began speaking up, corroborating Sarah's version of events, including the elderly woman they'd insulted. But Spider Webb had recovered his composure and his story. Officers, this woman attacked my friend for no reason. We were just talking and she went crazy on him. Look at his wrist. You can see the marks. It was true. Sarah's grip had left red pressure marks that were already starting to bruise. One of the officers, a young cop who couldn't have been more than 25, looked at Sarah with suspicion. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step off the bus. Officer, these young men were harassing her and threatening her service dog, the elderly woman protested. Ma'am, I appreciate your input, but I need to handle this, the young cop said dismissively. He looked at Sarah again. Off the bus, please, now. Sarah stood, signaling Atlas to follow. As she stepped into the aisle, Spider Webb couldn't resist one more jab. Yeah, that's right. Walk of shame, soldier girl. Not so tough now, are you? Outside, in the cool morning air, Sarah stood calmly as the two officers questioned her. The younger one did most of the talking, clearly skeptical of her account. His partner, an older officer with gray hair and a weathered face, stood back and watched Atlas with interest. "So you admit you grabbed him?" the young officer asked. "I restrained him when he touched my service dog after repeated warnings," Sarah corrected. "There's a difference." "Looks like assault to me. Do you have any ID?" Sarah pulled out her military ID and handed it over. The young officer barely glanced at it. "Lieutenant Commander, huh? Navy." "Yes." "Well, Lieutenant Commander, your military rank doesn't give you the right to assault civilians on public transportation." "I didn't assault anyone. I defended my service animal from unwanted contact after verbal warnings were ignored." The older officer finally spoke up. "Jake, let me see that ID." He took Sarah's card and studied it more carefully, then looked at her with new eyes. He noticed things his partner had missed: the way she stood, balanced and ready, the alertness in her eyes, the scars on her hands. He looked at Atlas again, noting the scars on the dog's flank, barely visible under his thick coat. "Military working dog?" he asked Sarah. "Retired, medical discharge." The officer knelt down slowly, and Atlas allowed him to examine his vest more closely. There, partially hidden by a fold, was a small patch, MWD K9 unit. "What branch?" the older officer asked, standing back up. Before Sarah could answer, the bus door opened and Spider Webb jumped out. "Officers, I want to press charges. That crazy woman assaulted me. I got witnesses." "Get back on the bus, son," the older officer said firmly. "But she—" "I said get back on the bus, now." Something in the officer's tone made Spider Webb comply, though he muttered curses under his breath as he retreated. The older officer handed Sarah her ID back. "I'm Sergeant Rodriguez. My son served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He told me about people like you." He glanced at his partner. "Jake, we're done here. No charges." "But Sarge—" "I said we're done. Ma'am, you're free to go. I apologize for the inconvenience." Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Sergeant." As the officers walked back to the station, Frank, the bus driver, called out, "We're ready to go, ma'am, if you want to get back on." Sarah looked at the bus, at the faces in the windows, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, and in the back, Spider Webb and his friends glaring at her with undisguised hostility. "I'll catch the next one," she said. Frank nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry about those punks. For what it's worth, you handled that better than most would have." The bus pulled away, leaving Sarah and Atlas alone at the stop. She sat down on the bench, and Atlas pressed against her leg. She ran her hand through his fur, feeling the ridge of scar tissue beneath. "Just another Tuesday, huh, boy?" she murmured. But as she sat there, watching the morning traffic pass by, Sarah felt a familiar weight settling over her shoulders. This was the part that never made it into the recruitment videos or the patriotic speeches. This was the reality of coming home. She'd spent 12 years serving her country, completing missions that remained classified, making split-second decisions that saved lives, losing friends to enemy fire and IEDs. She'd been one of the first women to complete SEAL training, had endured scrutiny and skepticism, and outright hostility from some of the men in her unit, until she'd proven herself time and time again. And now she was home, commuting to a desk job at the naval base where she trained recruits, and she couldn't even ride the bus without being called a liar and a pretender. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Commander Pearson, her direct supervisor. "Mitchell, need you in my office when you arrive. We need to discuss your performance review." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. The performance review. She'd almost forgotten. Pearson had made no secret of his opinion that women didn't belong in combat roles, that the military's move toward integration was political correctness run amok. He'd been trying to push her into a desk job farther from actual training operations, somewhere she'd have less influence. The next bus arrived 15 minutes later. Sarah and Atlas boarded, and this time, the ride was uneventful. But as she gazed out the window at the familiar streets of Oceanside, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, that the morning's confrontation was just the beginning of something larger. She had no idea how right she was. When she arrived at the base, Sarah checked in at the gate and made her way to the training complex. The morning classes had already begun, and she could hear the sounds of physical training echoing across the grounds, drill instructors barking orders, recruits calling out their count in unison. It had been her world once, that intensity, that purpose. Now she was on the outside looking in, training others to do what she'd once done, watching them prepare for missions she'd never be sent on again. Commander Pearson's office was in the administrative building, a sterile space that smelled of coffee and copy machine toner. His assistant waved her in without a word. Pearson looked up from his computer, his expression already set in disapproval. He was 52, heavyset, with the kind of career that had plateaued years ago and left him bitter about it. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, you're late." Sarah glanced at the clock. She was 3 minutes late thanks to the bus incident. "Yes, sir. There was a situation on my commute." "A situation." He said it like he didn't believe her. "Sit down." She sat, Atlas settled beside her chair. Pearson pulled up a document on his screen. "I've been reviewing your training reports. Your methods are unconventional." "My methods are effective, sir." "Your methods push the recruits too hard. We've had complaints." "Complaints from whom?" "That's not your concern. What is your concern is that you're here to implement the approved training curriculum, not to run your own personal boot camp." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "With respect, sir, the approved curriculum hasn't been updated in 8 years. Combat operations have evolved. Our training should evolve with them." "Are you questioning my judgment, Lieutenant Commander?" "I'm questioning outdated protocols, sir." Pearson's jaw tightened. "Let me make something clear, Mitchell. I don't care what you did overseas. I don't care about your combat record or your decorations or the fact that you managed to complete SEAL training. Here, on this base, in this command, you follow my orders and my protocols. Is that understood?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Understood, sir." "Good, because I'm reassigning you, effective next week. You'll be moving to administrative support in the recruitment office. Lieutenant Baxter will take over your training duties." The words hit like a physical blow, but Sarah didn't flinch. "Sir, with respect, I'm a combat instructor. My skills are wasted in recruitment." "Your skills, as you call them, are better suited to helping young people decide if military life is right for them. Lieutenant Baxter has a more measured approach to training, less aggressive." "Less effective, you mean?" "That's enough, Mitchell." Pearson stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "You have until Friday to transition your current class to Baxter. Dismissed." Sarah stood, saluted, though everything in her wanted to refuse, and left the office. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for a moment, feeling Atlas press against her leg in silent support. 12 years. 12 years of service, of sacrifice, of proving herself over and over again. And this was where it led, pushed aside by a bitter desk officer who resented everything she represented. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. "Incident on public transit. Navy officer accused of assault." Sarah's stomach sank as she clicked the link. There on her phone screen was a shaky video clearly recorded by one of the young men from the bus. It showed Sarah grabbing Spider Webb's wrist, but the video had been edited to remove the context. The harassment, the warnings, the reaching for her dog. It just showed her grabbing him, his face contorted in pain. The caption read, "Navy SEAL attacks innocent man on bus. Where's the accountability?" Navy SEAL. Someone had identified her, had dug into who she was. Within an hour, the video had been shared 800 times. By noon, it was trending on social media. By the end of the day, Sarah Mitchell's quiet life had become a public spectacle, and the real battle, the one that would test her in ways combat never had, was just beginning. The video went viral overnight. By Wednesday morning, it had been shared more than 50,000 times across various social media platforms, each share adding its own layer of commentary, judgment, and outrage. This is what's wrong with the military, giving power to people who abuse it. Navy SEAL assaults civilian for no reason. Disgraceful. Another example of military thinking there above the law. Sarah sat in her small apartment, Atlas at her feet, scrolling through the comments on her laptop. She knew better than to read them, knew it would only make things worse, but she couldn't stop. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying and hypnotic at the same time. A few voices tried to defend her, asking for context, pointing out that the video was clearly edited. But they were drowned out by the tide of anger. Someone had posted her name, her rank, even the base where she worked. Her personal information was spreading almost as fast as the video itself. Her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered it anyway. "Hello. Is this Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was male, professional, with the cadence of someone reading from notes. "Who's asking?" "My name is Derek Chen. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I wanted to get your comment on the incident that occurred on the number 47 bus yesterday morning." Sarah hung up without responding. The phone rang again immediately, a different number. She let it go to voicemail, then another call, and another. She turned off her phone. The knock on her door came an hour later. Sarah looked through the peephole and saw a woman in a business suit holding a microphone, a camera operator behind her. She didn't answer. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," the woman called through the door. "Just a few questions about yesterday's incident. We want to give you a chance to tell your side of the story." Sarah stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. This was surreal. She'd faced enemy combatants, had been in firefights, had jumped out of planes and breached hostile buildings. But standing in her own apartment, hiding from reporters, she felt more exposed and vulnerable than she ever had in combat. Eventually, they left, but Sarah knew they'd be back. At the base later that morning, she felt the stares. Walking across the compound with Atlas, she saw groups of service members clustered together, phones out, clearly watching something. A few of them looked up as she passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to judgment to pity. In the training facility's break room, the conversation stopped when she entered. Lieutenant Baxter, the man who'd be taking over her training duties, stood by the coffee maker with two other instructors. He looked at Sarah with barely concealed satisfaction. "Morning, Mitchell," he said, his tone overly casual. "Rough couple of days, huh?" "Morning, Baxter." "Saw the video, pretty intense stuff." He poured himself coffee with deliberate slowness. "Makes you wonder, though, doesn't it, about judgment, about whether someone with that kind of aggressive response should be training our young recruits." Sarah poured her own coffee, her movements calm despite the anger building in her chest. "The video doesn't show the full context." "Yeah, that's what they all say." Baxter smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "But you know what? The court of public opinion doesn't really care about context. They see what they see." One of the other instructors, a younger man named Garcia whom Sarah had always gotten along with, shifted uncomfortably. "Come on, Baxter. We don't know the whole story." "Don't we? I mean," she admitted, grabbing the guy right. "And there he is on video in pain. Seems pretty straightforward to me." Sarah set down her coffee cup carefully. "Are you finished?" "Just saying, maybe Commander Pearson had the right idea. Moving you to a position where you're not directly responsible for training. Less opportunity for incidents." Sarah walked out without responding. Behind her, she heard Garcia say something sharp to Baxter, but the words were lost as she moved down the hallway. In her office, which she'd only have for 2 more days, Sarah tried to focus on completing her transition reports. But every few minutes someone would walk by and glance in, their curiosity barely masked. The base grapevine had always been efficient, but in the age of viral videos, news traveled at the speed of light. Her desk phone rang. It was Commander Pearson's assistant. "The commander needs to see you immediately." This time, Pearson wasn't alone. A woman in civilian clothes sat in one of the chairs facing his desk, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of professional demeanor that screamed lawyer or public affairs. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, this is Commander Sarah Brennan from Naval Public Affairs," Pearson said. "She's here to discuss the situation." Brennan stood and shook Sarah's hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "Lieutenant Commander, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Please sit." Sarah sat, Atlas settling beside her. Brennan pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "I've reviewed the video that's circulating online," Brennan began. "I've also reviewed the police report from the incident and spoken with several witnesses from the bus. I understand there's more to this story than what the video shows." "Yes, ma'am. However, from a public relations standpoint, we have a significant problem. The video has been viewed over 200,000 times as of this morning. It's been picked up by several news outlets. There are already calls for your disciplinary action, even calls for criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" Sarah's voice remained steady, but inside her stomach churned. "I defended my service dog from harassment. I used minimal necessary force." "I believe you," Brennan said, and her tone was surprisingly sympathetic. "But belief and public perception are two different things. Right now, the narrative is that a Navy SEAL attacked an unarmed civilian on public transportation. That's the story people are sharing. That's the story they believe." "So what do you suggest?" Sarah asked. Brennan and Pearson exchanged a look. "We think it would be best if you took administrative leave while we conduct an internal review of the incident," Pearson said. "Administrative leave?" Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're suspending me." "We're protecting you," Brennan corrected, "and protecting the Navy. If you're on base right now, you're a lightning rod. Every reporter in San Diego is trying to get access to this facility to interview you. You becoming a story is making the Navy a story, and that's not good for anyone." "How long?" 2 weeks minimum, possibly longer depending on how the investigation proceeds." "Investigation? You're investigating me." "It's standard protocol for any incident involving a service member and civilian altercation," Brennan explained. "We'll interview witnesses, review all available evidence, and make a determination about whether any regulations were violated." Sarah looked at Pearson. "Sir, I've served 12 years without a single disciplinary action. My record is spotless." "Was spotless," Pearson said. "Past tense. Mitchell, whether you want to accept it or not, you assaulted a civilian. You may have had your reasons, but the action is undeniable. Now you need to step back and let the process work." "This is exactly what he wants," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly despite her attempts to stay calm. "The guy from the bus, he posted that video because I embarrassed him. This is retaliation and you're helping him." "That's enough, Lieutenant Commander," Pearson snapped. "You're dismissed. Clean out your desk. You'll be contacted when the investigation is complete." Sarah stood, every muscle in her body tense. "Yes, sir." Outside Pearson's office, Brennan caught up with her. "Lieutenant Commander, wait." Sarah turned. Brennan glanced around to make sure they were alone, then spoke in a lower voice. "Off the record, I've reviewed your service record. It's impressive, more than impressive. You've done things that most of these people," she gestured vaguely at the building around them, "can't even imagine." "Thank you, ma'am. But that's also your problem. You're not like them anymore, and they know it. You've been to places they'll never go, done things they'll never do, and some people, like Pearson, resent that, especially when it comes from someone who challenges their worldview about who should be doing those things. Sarah understood what Brennan wasn't quite saying, especially when it comes from a woman. "So what do I do?" Sarah asked. "Keep your head down. Don't talk to reporters. Don't engage on social media. Let this blow over naturally. These viral stories have a short shelf life. Something else will grab people's attention in a few days and this will fade away." "And if it doesn't?" Brennan's expression was sympathetic but honest. "Then you hope the investigation clears you, because if it doesn't, your career is over." By Thursday evening, Sarah felt like a prisoner in her own apartment. The reporters had multiplied. There were now 3 news vans parked on her street, cameras trained on her building. Someone had leaked her address, and the more aggressive journalists had started knocking on neighbors' doors, asking questions about her. Mrs. Chen from across the hall, a kind elderly woman who'd always smiled at Sarah in the elevator, had given an interview describing Sarah as quiet, keeps to herself, seemed normal. The quote had been picked up and amplified. Neighbors shocked by Navy SEAL's violent outburst. "She seemed normal," says neighbor. Sarah's phone, which she'd turned back on to contact her family, was flooded with messages. Some were supportive, from old Navy friends who knew her character. But many were hateful, vitriolic messages from strangers telling her she was a disgrace, that she deserved to rot in prison, that she gave all service members a bad name. One message stood out, though. It was from Master Chief Tom Reeves, who'd been her instructor during SEAL training and had become a mentor over the years. The message was simple: "Mitchell, this will pass. You're stronger than this. Call me if you need to talk." She almost cried reading it. In a sea of judgment and accusation, that simple vote of confidence felt like a lifeline. But the pressure kept building. On Friday, Channel 7 News ran a special segment, "Military Justice: When Does Self-Defense Go Too Far?" The segment featured the bus video, interviews with the young men from the bus, who claimed they were just having a conversation when Sarah went crazy, and commentary from a legal expert discussing assault laws. The segment also revealed something Sarah hadn't known. Spider Webb, whose real name was Marcus Thompson, had hired a lawyer. He was considering filing a civil lawsuit against Sarah for assault and emotional distress. "My client was traumatized by this unprovoked attack," the lawyer said on camera. "He's afraid to ride public transportation now. He has trouble sleeping. This Navy officer used her military training to brutalize a civilian, and there need to be consequences." Sarah watched the segment in her darkened apartment, Atlas's head resting on her lap. The story was completely inverted now. She was the aggressor. Marcus Thompson was the victim. The harassment, the intimidation, the threats toward an elderly woman, none of that fit the narrative, so it had been discarded. Her doorbell rang. Sarah looked through the peephole and saw Garcia, the instructor from her unit who'd spoken up in the break room. She opened the door. "Garcia, what are you doing here?" "Can I come in? The reporters saw me, and I'd rather not have this conversation in the hallway." She let him in. Garcia looked around the apartment, modest, neat, with a few military plaques on the walls and photos from deployments. Atlas sniffed him suspiciously before settling back down. "Hell of a week," Garcia said. "That's one way to put it. I wanted to come by because, look, I was on that bus a few months ago when those same guys were harassing a teenager. They're regular troublemakers. I recognized them from the video. I thought you should know that I'm willing to testify to their pattern of behavior if it comes to that." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, that means a lot. Also, for what it's worth, the guys in the unit, most of them anyway, they don't believe the story these punks are selling. We know you. We know your character." "Does Pearson know that?" Garcia grimaced. "Pearson knows what he wants to know. He's been looking for a reason to move you out since you got assigned to training. This just gave him the excuse he needed. What about my recruits, my current class? Baxter took over yesterday. He's already changed half your curriculum, made it easier. The recruits are confused, asking where you are. I told them you were on temporary assignment. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Those recruits, the current class had shown such promise. She'd been pushing them hard because she knew what they'd face in the field, knew that the difference between her high standards and Baxter's adequate standards could mean the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. There's something else, Garcia said, his expression darkening. Word is that the video wasn't random. Thompson, the guy from the bus, he's connected to some people who have been trying to dig up dirt on military personnel for a while now. Anti-military activists. They've been looking for a story like this. So this was targeted. I don't know if they targeted you specifically or if they just saw an opportunity and took it. But the speed at which this blew up, the coordination of the social media campaign, the lawyer appearing so quickly, it's not organic. Someone's orchestrating this. After Garcia left, Sarah sat in the darkness, processing this new information. If this was part of a larger campaign, then defending herself might be even harder than she thought. This wasn't just about one incident on a bus. She'd become a symbol, a convenient villain in someone else's narrative about military overreach. The weekend was a blur of anxiety and isolation. Sarah didn't leave her apartment except to walk Atlas very early in the morning, before the reporters arrived. She ordered groceries for delivery. She ignored the constant notifications on her phone. On Sunday evening, her mother called from Ohio. "Sarah, honey, are you okay? I saw the news." "I'm fine, Mom. It's all blown out of proportion. Those boys on the news said you attacked them for no reason." "Mom, they were harassing me in Atlas. They were threatening us. I defended my dog." There was a pause. "I believe you, sweetheart, but the video. The video doesn't show what happened before. It's edited." Another pause. "Have you thought about just apologizing? Maybe if you said you were sorry, this would all go away." Sarah closed her eyes. Her mother meant well, but she didn't understand. "I'm not apologizing for defending myself and my dog, Mom. But if it would make this stop." "It wouldn't. These people don't want an apology. They want to destroy my career and my reputation. An apology would just be an admission of guilt." Her mother sighed. "I worry about you. You're all alone out there." "I'm not alone. I have Atlas." "A dog isn't the same as having people, Sarah." After the call ended, Sarah looked at Atlas, who gazed back at her with complete, uncomplicated loyalty. "She's wrong," Sarah told him. "You're better than people." Atlas's tail thumped against the floor. Monday morning brought a new development. Sarah received an official letter from the Navy. The investigation into her conduct was being expanded. They were now reviewing her entire training record, looking at complaints from recruits, examining her methods for any pattern of excessive aggression. Translation: they were building a case against her. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, reading the letter 3 times, feeling the walls close in. This was how it happened. This was how careers ended, not in a blaze of glory, not even in honest defeat, but in bureaucratic death by 1,000 cuts. They'd find something, some minor infraction or judgment call that could be reinterpreted as evidence of poor character. They'd use it to justify whatever punishment they'd already decided on. Her phone rang. Master Chief Reeves. "Tom," she answered, her voice barely steady. "Mitchell, I heard about the expanded investigation. Listen to me carefully. You need a lawyer. Not the jag they'll assign you, a real lawyer, someone who specializes in military defense." "I can't afford." "I know someone who will do it pro bono. Former JAG officer, brilliant attorney, and she owes me a favor. Her name is Colonel Jennifer Walsh, retired. I'm sending you her number. Call her today." "Tom, I don't know what to say." Don't say anything, just fight. You're a SEAL, Mitchell, act like one. After the call, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in days, a spark of determination. Tom was right. She'd been reacting, defending, retreating. That wasn't who she was. It was time to start fighting back. She called Colonel Walsh. The conversation was brief but reassuring. Walsh had already heard about the case and had done some preliminary research. "They're overplaying their hand," Walsh said. "The expanded investigation is a fishing expedition. They're hopping to find something to justify a predetermined outcome. But if your record is as clean as Tom says it is, they won't find anything." "What about the video?" "The video is a problem, but it's not insurmountable. We need to locate more witnesses from the bus, people who saw what happened before the video started. We need to establish a pattern of harassment from Thompson and his friends. And we need to be ready for whatever the Navy's investigation turns up." For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah felt like she had an ally. Someone in her corner who understood the system and knew how to fight it. But that small measure of hope was shattered the next morning when she woke up to find a new story trending online. Navy SEAL under investigation for pattern of violent behavior. Someone inside the Navy, someone with access to information about the investigation, had leaked it to the press. And with that leak, Sarah Mitchell's ordeal entered a new, darker phase. The leak changed everything. Within 24 hours, what had been a controversial viral video became a full-scale media investigation into Sarah Mitchell's military career. Reporters dug through every available record, FOIA'd documents from her deployments, and interviewed anyone who'd ever served with her. Most of her former teammates refused to comment or defended her, but not all of them. A former SEAL named Bryce Kowalski, who'd been in her training class and had washed out during Hell Week, gave an interview to a military blog that specialized in controversial stories. "She was always aggressive, always trying to prove she was tougher than the guys," he said. "There were times during training when I thought she was going to really hurt someone. She had this look in her eyes like she wasn't quite in control." The fact that Kowalski had failed the course and had been known for making excuses about it wasn't mentioned in the article. The fact that his evaluation had specifically cited inability to work as part of a team and excessive ego was also omitted. All that made it into the story was his quote, which painted Sarah as unstable and dangerous. Other stories followed. A recruiter who'd worked with Sarah during a publicity event 3 years ago described her as intense and difficult to work with. A logistics officer who'd filed a complaint about her demanding equipment requests for her training unit during a deployment was quoted as saying she didn't respect normal channels of authority. Each story taken in isolation was thin and circumstantial, but together they created a narrative. Sarah Mitchell was a troubled officer with a history of aggression and disregard for rules. The Navy's investigation, meanwhile, had uncovered 3 formal complaints filed by recruits over the past 2 years. Sarah had been aware of them at the time. They'd all been dismissed as baseless by her superiors. The complaints came from recruits who'd failed her training course and blamed her excessive demands for their failure. Now those complaints were being re-examined, their dismissal being questioned. Had her superiors at the time given her preferential treatment because of her decorated background? Had they overlooked warning signs? Commander Pearson was quoted in an internal memo that was somehow leaked to the press. "It is becoming clear that LT, Commander Mitchell's transition from combat operations to training duties was not as smooth as we initially believed. Her methods, while perhaps effective in the field, may not be appropriate for a structured training environment." Sarah read these stories in her apartment, feeling her world crumble around her. This wasn't just about the bus incident anymore. They were dismantling her entire career, reframing every difficult decision and demanding standard as evidence of instability. Colonel Walsh called with increasingly grim updates. "They're building a case for administrative separation," she said on Wednesday. They want you out of the Navy. On what grounds? Conduct unbecoming, pattern of aggressive behavior, inability to adapt to non-combat roles. They'll package it carefully, probably offer you the chance to resign rather than face a board. And if I refuse? Then you fight it at a separation board, which will be held in front of officers who have already been primed by all this media coverage to see you as the problem. Sarah, I have to be honest with you. The deck is stacked against you right now. That evening, as Sarah sat in her darkened living room with Atlas, she received an email from Marcus Thompson's lawyer. It was a settlement offer. In exchange for a written apology, a payment of $50,000, and Sarah's agreement not to disparage Thompson publicly, he would drop his civil lawsuit and issue a public statement asking for understanding and forgiveness. The email made it clear. This was about money and publicity, not justice. Sarah deleted the email without responding. Thursday brought another blow. The story had reached national news. A cable news network ran a segment titled "Military Justice Under Scrutiny" that used Sarah's case as an example of how the armed forces handled internal discipline. The segment featured talking heads debating whether the military was too lenient with its members, whether special operations personnel received preferential treatment, and whether women in combat roles faced adequate psychological screening. Sarah was no longer a person to these people. She was a symbol, a data point, a convenient example to support whatever argument they wanted to make about military culture. The hate mail intensified. Someone found her email address and she started receiving dozens of messages daily, ranging from angry rants to graphic threats. One email described in detail how the sender hoped Sarah would be attacked and beaten. Another suggested she kill herself. Several included specific threats against Atlas. Sarah stopped reading them, but she couldn't stop them from coming. Each notification was a little knife, a reminder that somewhere out there, strangers hated her with an intensity that defied reason. On Friday afternoon, Sergeant Rodriguez, the older police officer who'd been at the scene of the bus incident, came to her apartment. He looked uncomfortable, official. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, I wanted to tell you in person before you heard it officially. The district attorney's office has decided to file misdemeanor assault charges against you." Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. "What?" "I'm sorry. I know it's not right. I gave them my report, told them exactly what I saw, but there's pressure from Thompson's lawyer and from the media attention. The DA thinks a jury would convict based on the video, so they're moving forward." "When?" "You'll receive a court summons early next week. I really am sorry. For what it's worth, I think this is bullshit." After Rodriguez left, Sarah sat on her couch, unable to move, unable to think. Criminal charges. She was going to be tried in criminal court for defending herself and her dog. Her phone rang. It was Commander Pearson's office, but not his assistant this time, Pearson himself. "Mitchell, I've just been informed about the DA's decision. Given these new developments, the Navy's position has changed. We need to meet tomorrow morning, 800 at the base. This is not optional." "Sir, I'm on administrative leave." "Not anymore. Tomorrow 800 be there." The line went dead. Sarah looked at Atlas, who watched her with concern, sensing her distress. She pulled him close, burying her face in his fur, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, she cried. She cried for the career she was losing, for the reputation being destroyed, for the injustice of it all. She cried for the 12 years of service that suddenly seemed meaningless, for the friends she'd lost in combat who died believing they were protecting a country that valued honor and truth. She cried until she had nothing left, until she was empty. And then in that emptiness, something shifted. Sarah pulled back from Atlas and looked into his dark eyes. He'd been through hell too, had been wounded, discharged, abandoned by the only world he'd known. But he hadn't given up. He'd adapted, survived, found a new purpose. If Atlas could do it, so could she. Sarah stood up, wiped her face, and opened her laptop. She began documenting everything, every detail of the bus incident she could remember, every witness who'd been present, every conversation with Pearson, every leaked story and questionable quote. She wrote for hours, creating a comprehensive timeline of events and irregularities. At midnight, she emailed it all to Colonel Walsh with a simple message: "I'm done being defensive. Let's take the fight to them." Walsh responded within minutes: "Now you're thinking like a SEAL. Let's talk strategy in the morning." Sarah went to bed that night with a sense of grim determination. She'd been pushed to the breaking point, had felt herself bending under the weight of public opinion and institutional pressure. But she hadn't broken. And she wasn't going to. Saturday morning, Sarah arrived at the base at 7:45. She wore her dress uniform, immaculate pressed, every ribbon and medal in its proper place. Atlas walked beside her, his service vest clean and professional. She'd spent the early hours of the morning preparing for this meeting, going over every possible scenario with Colonel Walsh. Whatever Pearson had planned, she was ready. Except she wasn't ready for what she found. Pearson's office was crowded. In addition to the commander himself, there were two officers from Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Commander Brennan from Public Affairs, and a captain Sarah didn't recognize, older, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in the service. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," Pearson began, "this is Captain Robert Chen, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command." Sarah's heart raced. Captain Chen's presence meant this was far more serious than she'd anticipated. Chen was high enough in the chain of command to make career-ending decisions with a single word. "Please sit," Chen said. His voice was neutral, unreadable. Sarah sat, Atlas at her feet. "Lieutenant Commander, we've completed our investigation into the bus incident and into your conduct as a training instructor," one of the NCIS officers began, reading from a file. "We've identified multiple areas of concern." "However," Captain Chen interrupted, "before we proceed with our findings, I want to clarify something for the record." He looked directly at Sarah. "Are you currently represented by legal counsel?" "Yes, sir, Colonel Jennifer Walsh, retired JAG." "Good, you should have her present for this meeting. We can reschedule." "With respect, sir, I'd prefer to proceed now," Sarah said. "I have nothing to hide." Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Continue," he told the NCIS officer. "Our investigation has revealed that you used physical force against a civilian, Marcus Thompson, on the morning of September 24th. While witnesses confirm that Thompson and his associates were engaged in verbal harassment, the use of physical force is difficult to justify under the circumstances. I defended my service dog from unwanted physical contact after multiple verbal warnings," Sarah said calmly. "Your service dog," Pearson interjected, "which is not officially registered with the base or approved for your use during duty hours." Sarah's jaw tightened. Atlas is a retired military working dog. His registration was handled through channels that we've discovered were not properly documented," Pearson finished, "which raises questions about your adherence to protocol." This was it, Sarah realized. They were going to use every technicality, every minor oversight to paint her as someone who didn't follow rules. "Additionally," the NCIS officer continued, "we've reviewed the 3 complaints filed by recruits in your training program. While these were initially dismissed, re-examination suggests a pattern of excessive demands and aggressive training methods that exceed approved parameters. Those recruits failed because they weren't willing to meet basic standards," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. "Standards that exist to keep them alive in combat situations." "That's a matter of interpretation," Pearson said. What's not up for interpretation is that you've now been charged with criminal assault by the district attorney's office. That fact alone makes your continued service untenable. Commander Pearson, Captain Chen said quietly, I'll handle this. Pearson sat back, clearly annoyed but unwilling to challenge Chen's authority. Chen pulled out his own file, separate from the NCIS report. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, I've reviewed your complete service record, 12 years of distinguished service, multiple commendations, a Bronze Star with valor for actions during Operation Redwind, where you pulled 2 wounded teammates to safety under heavy fire, a Navy Cross for your actions during the Kabul extraction, where you held a position for 8 hours against overwhelming odds. Sarah blinked, surprised that Chen was citing her achievements. I've also spoken with Master Chief Reeves, with Lieutenant Commander Jackson, with every officer and enlisted personnel who served with you in combat. To a person, they described you as courageous, skilled, and completely dedicated to the mission and to your team. Sir, Pearson began, her combat record isn't. Be quiet, Commander, Chen said, his voice sharp enough to make Pearson flinch. He turned back to Sarah. I've also watched the complete video footage from the bus, not just the edited version that went viral. The bus company provided their security footage to NCIS. It shows the harassment, the threats, the multiple warnings you gave. It shows Marcus Thompson and his friends intimidating elderly passengers and cornering you in your seat. Sarah's heart began to pound. Sir, I didn't know that footage existed. Most people don't know that buses have multiple cameras, including overhead shots that capture entire conversations. The footage makes it very clear that you acted with remarkable restraint under the circumstances. Most people, including most service members, would have responded more aggressively much earlier. Commander Brennan was suddenly taking notes. The NCIS officers looked confused, glancing at each other. However, Chen continued, the fact remains that this incident has become a public relations nightmare for the Navy. Your face is on the news. Your name is being used as a talking point by critics of the military. Fair or not, you've become a liability. Sarah felt her hope crashing. So you're separating me? No, Chen said, I'm not. The room went silent. Sir, Pearson sputtered, with respect, the optics of keeping her on. I don't care about optics, Commander. I care about doing what's right. And what's right is not ending the career of a decorated combat veteran because she defended herself from harassment. Chen looked at each person in the room. The bus footage will be released to the public today, along with a full statement from Naval Public Affairs detailing the actual events of that morning. The NCIS investigation has found no evidence of wrongdoing by Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, either in the bus incident or in her training methods. But the recruits' complaints, Pearson tried again, were filed by recruits who failed to meet basic physical fitness standards and sought someone to blame. The complaints were properly dismissed the first time and remain dismissed now. Chen stood up. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, you will be reinstated to active duty effective immediately. You will resume your training responsibilities. And Commander Pearson, you will provide her with every resource and support she needs to do her job effectively. Pearson's face had gone red, but he nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. As for the criminal charges, Chen continued, the Navy will provide full legal support through the JAG office, in addition to whatever private counsel you've retained. We will also be issuing a formal statement expressing our confidence in you and our disagreement with the DA's decision to prosecute. Sarah couldn't speak. After days of watching her world collapse, this sudden reversal left her reeling. Do you have any questions, Lieutenant Commander? Chen asked. Sir, thank you, I don't know what to say. Don't thank me. You earned your place here through years of exemplary service. I'm simply ensuring that one incident, taken out of context and weaponized by people with agendas, doesn't erase everything you've accomplished. Chen picked up his cover. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a press conference to attend. After Chen left, taking the NCIS officers and Commander Brennan with him, Sarah and Pearson were alone in the office. Pearson looked at her with undisguised resentment. "You may have won this round, Mitchell, but don't get comfortable. Sooner or later you'll make a mistake, and when you do, I'll be there." Sarah stood, called Atlas to her side, and looked Pearson in the eye. "Commander, I've spent 12 years in combat zones, making split-second decisions where mistakes meant people died. You think I'm afraid of you. You're not the enemy. You're just an obstacle, and I've overcome far worse obstacles than you." She walked out, leaving Pearson sputtering behind her. Outside, in the bright California sunshine, Sarah felt like she could breathe for the first time in days. But she knew this wasn't over. Captain Chen had won her a reprieve, but the criminal charges still loomed. The court of public opinion was still weighted against her, and Marcus Thompson's lawsuit was still pending. The real battle was just beginning. But as she walked across the base with Atlas, past groups of service members who'd seen Chen's press conference streaming on their phones and were now looking at her with something like respect, Sarah felt a familiar fire kindle in her chest. This was what she'd trained for, not the combat itself, but the perseverance, the refusal to quit even when everything seemed lost.